Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, in the briefing room at the White House. A lot there content-wise, and we'll talk about it as our live coverage on NewsNation continues. I'm Connell McShane, just past the 4 p.m. Eastern hour, joined by NewsNation political contributor Mick Mulvaney, who's the former Trump White House chief of staff, and our correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera, who joins us just about every day with his daily take. Hello, sir. Mick, to start with you, and like I said, a lot of content, including at the end on the War Powers Act, including at the beginning when he was talking about Project Freedom being just an offensive, not a defensive operation. But on the bigger picture, Marco Rubio as a briefer and as a spokesperson for this administration on this war, what would you say about that today?
Yeah, we can talk another time about how I get the correspondent at large title. That's one of my favorite titles. I'm not sure how he got that, but I want one.
He's a large man, that Geraldo.
I was impressed with his candor.
It was a coup.
It's funny you say that because I've done this before. I've done those briefings, right, when I unveiled the budget and so forth. And that's one of the most hostile work environments you can be in as a politician, and he handled it really, really well. I didn't realize I was not the only person who picked up on that. He was very smooth, very in control, didn't get flustered. You heard him react a couple times to the amount of energy that was in the room and people yelling and screaming at him. But that's really, really what it's like. What folks don't realize, Connell, I don't know if you've been there or not, how small the room is and how close those folks are to you. You could almost reach out and touch the people in the front row. So I thought he did extraordinarily well. He maintained his composure the whole time, stayed to the topics, answered the questions that were asked, which is rare for these briefings. A lot of times, you know, the reporters have the questions they want to ask, and the folks give the answers they want to give, and those things often don't meet. But I thought he did a really good job of articulating the positions of the administration. My guess is we'll see him in that position again shortly.
That's my question, Geraldo, whether we will or not. I mean, we see the president almost every day. I was sitting here watching it because we watch all of these briefings. We take the president live. Earlier, Pete Hegseth and Dan Kane were broadcast live on our network. That, you know, Rubio might be the spokesperson that this administration should turn to more often. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely do, 100%. I thought he was extremely presidential. I thought he had tremendous poise. He was informed. He shocked everybody speaking Spanish where it was totally appropriate, which would make him, and I think that this is what a lot of people were thinking, an excellent presidential candidate and one of the first, if not the first, bilingual presidential candidate. He was very sophisticated, very knowledgeable. He didn't duck any of the questions. He I think, made a plausible argument for something that is implausible if you look at it soberly. He couched Project Freedom as a humanitarian effort that should rally the nations of the world. He said sailors are on those stranded ships starving. You know, he made the IRGC pirates, he called them. This is an act of piracy. The world should rally. Where's the United Nations? If it means anything, it should free up these poor 23,000 sailors. I thought Rubio was terrific.
Yeah, he wanted to say that this project is not offensive. It's a defensive operation. It's separate from Operation Epic Fury, which he argues has concluded. That was that last point about the War Powers Act. But here's a clip as we talk more about the actual content of what he briefed on, Mick, of Rubio kind of making the case about nuclear weapons and the overall, what would happen if Iran had a nuke, as an articulation of why we're kind of doing this. Here's the secretary.
What do you think they would do if they had a nuclear weapon? They would hold the world hostage with that nuclear weapon. That's what they would do. They would do exactly to the world with a nuclear weapon what they're doing now with the Straits. And I think the president's point is how anyone cannot see that as an unacceptable outcome and an unacceptable risk is beyond him. It's puzzling. And someone has to do something about it.
Someone has to do something about it. That someone, obviously, is the United States. Mick, that as an argument and the way that Rubio put it forward, what do you say?
Really, really good. Better 6 weeks ago. You know, how many times have we said that about the administration now, is that part of the challenge we face, they face, is that they didn't really lay the foundations. He's right. Everything he just said is absolutely spot on correct. Okay. I think, though, that leads to a natural follow-up question, which is, okay, how are we going to do that? How are we going to make sure they don't have nuclear weapons? How are we going to open up the straits? How much longer is this going to take? He did an excellent job, I think, of laying the foundations for making the case of why we're doing what we're doing, better so than maybe anybody else in the administration so far. But what I didn't hear today is, and this is what's going to happen, this is why we think we can win is not the right word, but accomplish what we want to accomplish, which is no nuclear weapons and the straits are open. I didn't hear that today. And my guess is I'm not the only one who's still asking those questions.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.